assuming that there is something specific that is attracting men, I think that what it is a call to responsibility, essentially. I think that people are, especially young men, are sick and tired of being fed a constant diet of, you're good enough, you should feel happy with who you are. An endless diet of rights and freedoms will give you a meaningful life. And that's on the sort of pat you on the back, even though you don't deserve it, side of reality. And then there's the lack of call to adventure, I would say, and the accusation that men face increasingly that their active presence in the world does nothing but contribute to tyranny and oppression, which I think is absolute. It's not only nonsense, it's pernicious and destructive nonsense of the worst kind. And so, I've been telling men instead, or suggesting to them, explaining it more than telling, that it's necessary for them to grow up and get their act together and to adopt some responsibility and to bear a burden and to speak truthfully and to take responsibility, because there's important things to do in the world, and that the world will be a lesser place if they don't allow what's within them to come forward. And I think that that's true. And so I think that that's a message that reasonable young men who are somewhat lost are desperate for. Well, if you're not going to be rewarded for your virtues and instead you're going to be punished for them, then what's your motivation to continue, especially when it takes a fair bit of effort to say truthful things and to shoulder responsibility? And if the consequence of that, so there's reason to avoid it to begin with, just as a consequence of the difficulty. But if the net effect of doing that is that you're accused before you even do anything wrong of being an upholder of rape culture and the patriarchal tyranny and the oppressive West, then why in the world would you want to contribute to that, especially if you start to believe it? Some of it's just a matter of accepting excuses and taking the easy way out, but some of it's a matter of becoming guilty enough to actually believe it, withdrawing from active engagement in the world. The people who are going after masculinity, let's say, as toxic, can't distinguish between tyrannical power and competence. In fact, for them, there is no distinction between those two things, which shows you just how addled they really are, because it's extraordinarily important to discriminate between competence and power. And the postmodern types, especially the neo-Marxists, think, oh, well, competence, that's just how you justify your claim to your position. It's really just power. You're just defining competence in a way that benefits you. But that's idiotic. So it doesn't really require much of an argument. And certainly no one ever acts like that. If you have a car and it doesn't work, you take it to a competent mechanic. If your father's heart is failing, you take him to a competent surgeon. And you don't think, oh, well, that person is just there because of the Western patriarchy and the privilege of the oppressor. So it's nonsense. It's resentful, cowardly, ideologically possessed, pathological nonsense, and it's extremely dangerous. And so I've been saying that about as bluntly as I just said it. And I think that more and more people are realizing that it's gone far enough. I'm sure hoping they are. Life is very difficult. Life, there's one of the most ancient of religious ideas that it emerges everywhere, I would say, is that life is essentially suffering. And what that means is that, well, people are fragile and vulnerable and mortal and prone to physical decay and mental illness and to a fair share of malevolence as well. We're fragile creatures. And that means that life is hard and painful and anxiety-provoking. And you need something to set against that that's worthwhile. And that's your destiny in the world, say your positive destiny in the world. And if you don't have something positive to set against that, and your life is nothing but struggle and pain, and with the occasional foray into malevolence or victimization by malevolence, then all you do is suffer stupidly, and that makes you bitter and resentful. And then, that's just the beginning of your trouble, because bitter and resentful, that's just where you start the descent into hell. You go from bitter and resentful to vengeful and to cruel and way past that if you really want to pursue it. And people pursue that all the time. It's not like it doesn't happen. It's not like this is some abstract dream. All those high school shootings, all these mass shootings, they're all carried out by people who've walked down that road a very long distance. I wrote about that in chapter 6. It's rule 6 is called set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. And it's about the motivations of people like the Columbine high school shooters and the mass rapist, the serial rapist, Carl Panzram, who features very heavily in that chapter. And it's a meditation on people's motivation for evil, which exists in all of us. And no wonder, like, it's understandable. That doesn't make it right. So the book 12 Rules for Life is a very serious book. There's elements of humor in it, but I'm trying to struggle with things at the deepest possible level and to explain to people why it's necessary to live a upstanding and noble and moral and truthful and responsible life, and why there's hell to pay if you don't do that.
Tell people life is hard and here's how to handle it.
Well, that's it. Well,
Right.
Everyone knows life is hard. And it's not just hard. It can be unbearably hard. And it's worse than hard, because sometimes the hardship is inflicted upon you by yourself or by someone close to you, or sometimes by an enemy, but sometimes by a friend. You get betrayed. And it's not just that it's hard. You're also subject to evil. You're subject to malevolence, and that makes it even worse. And everyone knows this. And so you need something to set against that. You need a noble way of being to set against that. And the thing is, all of everything I've said so far in this program, I would say in some sense is very dark and pessimistic, But what's optimistic is that having established the truth of the matter, the suffering of life and the malevolence that's part of it, you can also discover that living a meaningful life in the face of that, a responsible, meaningful, truthful life, is actually possible, and it actually works. That's the thing. That's the optimistic thing. It's not so bad to say to people, look, we've got a real problem here. It's no joke. It's a dead serious problem. It's the fragility of your life and hell all balled up into one thing. But that's okay, because there's an antidote to it. There's something you can do about it, and you could start today. And, well, that's what I try to detail out in 12 Rules for Life and in my lectures online as well. And I believe it to be the case. As pessimistic as I am about the nature of human beings and our capacity for atrocity and malevolence and betrayal and laziness and inertia and all those things, I think we can transcend all that and set things straight. And I think that people can literally start today. I believe that the experience of meaning is an instinct. And you could think about it as the ordering instinct. It's more like the balancing instinct, but we'll start with ordering. There's a lot inside of you that needs to be ordered and set straight. Like you're a collection of motivations and emotions and thoughts and proto-actions and desires. Well, I suppose those are the same as motivations. You're a loose collection of all those things. And something has to bring all of that into a functioning order. And the experience of deep engagement, the experience of meaning, I think, is the manifestation of the instinct that orders you. And it orders you, and it orders your family, and it orders the world, the broader world as well. And that instinct isn't some secondary consequence of some more important biological function, let's say. It is that very function. And I think we know enough about neuroscience now. I think we know enough about how the brain operates to just make that statement categorically. So my hypothesis has been, and this is not a fully original hypothesis, it's based on the work of neuroscientists whose research I know well and respect greatly, very hard-headed people. They believe, for example, that the left hemisphere is specialized for operation in explored territory, and that the right hemisphere is specialized for operation in unexplored territory. Well, you need to practice things. You need to know what you're doing, and you have to have a place where that works. So that would be explored territory or order or routine. And so part of your brain works well there. But then that's surrounded always by things that you don't understand. And so there's another part of your brain that has to work with the things you don't understand. And the sense of meaning occurs when you get those two systems working properly together so that you're partly stable and secure and operating where you know what's going to happen next and it's going to be something that you want, but also expanding your competence at the same time and pushing yourself and stretching yourself so that if things shift on you, then you're going to be ready and prepared. And that's a deep instinct. That's the instinct of meaning, as far as I can tell. And it's an unerring guide to proper action in the world.